Now let's make our list look a little better, or a lot better. So first of all, they've got bullets. And it is a list, but I don't really want it. I don't really want bullets. That's no good. So how about on this UL? Wouldn't you know it? Foundation gives us some stuff that we can do for this just right out of the box. I don't know if I can find it in the documentation anymore, but I know that for lists, if you give it a class of no bullet, it does exactly what that sounds like. Yeah. Answer before of null. What did I do here? I got rid of the template. Didn't I? No. What happened? What did I change? Oh, I put it in the ID instead of a class. Whoops. Class equals, thank you, no bullet. That's better. Refresh. And there's no bullet. And it didn't break the whole thing. All right, that's a step in the right direction. Now the word button group caught my eye. Kind of stick these buttons all together. We're going to have more than one button here, aren't we? What's our next button going to be? Promote? Let's make that. Button, also of type button. Class, we'll give it a class of promote so we can find it later. It's also going to have that button class. There it is. Call it promote. Let's see. I like this color for promote. So I'm going to stick warning in there. See how that looks. I mean, that's fine, I guess. I don't know. Those button groups look pretty nice. Let's make a button group. So div class button. They're all already in a span called actions. What if actions is a button group? All right, now they're kind of closer together there. Yep. But they're underneath, which is not really what I wanted. Do a little custom CSS here. I think I showed you floating yesterday a little bit. So if we say dot actions, float to the right. Fresh. Well, it floated to the right, and then the one underneath floated right into it. So one thing, if you start messing with floats, that you'll learn about is clear. Clear : both is something that you put on something that follows a float to make sure that it doesn't, that it starts over on a new line and is all the way underneath all that floating stuff. So all of our list items need to do that. It's such a common thing that it seems like most projects have a class somewhere in their CSS called ClearFix that does that. Foundation has such a class built in. So we can just add to the LI, student template, let's add ClearFix. Refresh. Okay, much better. Give this thing a nice border. Let's grab a student. Let's say anything with a class student gets a nice border. 1 pixel, solid, triple D. Talked about the fact that that's really 6 Ds. 2 digits each for red, green, blue. 2 hexadecimal digits, which means really values 0 through 255. Now, the border properties in CSS, you have border top, border right, border bottom, border left, or the shorthand border property, which applies to all. See how that looks? All right, there's a border. Now, this thing's kind of hugging that border a little close. That doesn't look very good. Let's do something about it. Let's throw some padding in there. Let's inspect this rascal. Okay, there's my span. I want my LI. Now, with my LI highlighted, I can see all of the style rules that are applied to it down here. I can even get a nice little look at the box model. It has no margin. It has a border of 1 pixel. No padding, and here's the actual element itself. Notice padding is inside the border. Margin is outside the border. So it's padding that I want, right? Not margin. So something else I can do is add the rules right here. Now, obviously, they won't be saved, but I can experiment and see what looks good by doing it right here inside the DevTools. So I could actually add it to one of my existing rules, or I could change just the element that I have selected. But I want the same padding on all my students. So padding like border has top, right, bottom, left, or the shorthand. If you say padding, where did I go? Padding 0.75 rim. That's going to apply to all sides. If I want them different on each side, I can still use the shorthand. Top is first, followed by right. And if I stop there, then what it's going to do is make the bottom match the top and the left match the right. But I could keep going and do something different for the bottom and different for the left. But I'm gonna do it like this. Top and bottom will have 0.75 rim. Left and right will have 1.25 rim. What the heck's a rim? For our purposes, it's just kind of our base unit. We're going to make everything relative to that. It's 16 pixels in this case. It's the default font size. But that's a decent amount of padding. I like that. So don't forget, we actually need to put it in our style sheet. Refresh, save and refresh, make sure the padding's still there. It is. Now there's still a bunch of nonsense at the bottom. What's that all about? Let's have a look. Let's inspect some stuff. Okay, if I hover over the LI, okay, I see that padding around the edge. I still can't see why that extra space is under the buttons. If I look at the span student name, it's not that. The button group, see that orange? That's margin. The button group has 16 pixels of bottom margin. If we want to know where that rule is coming from, just look here. Button group, margin bottom 1 rim. That's coming from Foundation. So we want to override that rule with our own. We could apply a rule to button group, but it's not all button groups. That's probably a perfectly fine rule in other places. The point is we want our actions button group not to have that margin, right? So let's just say margin bottom 0. Refresh the page. It goes away. Now something else is bugging me. Look closely. They've all got a 1 pixel border around them, right? Now here in between the two, the border's extra thick. Why? Because the bottom border of the top one is running into the top border of the bottom one. So maybe if it's the top one, we don't want a bottom border. So we know all about classes, right? You can throw a class on something and target it with a selector based on the class. There are also these things called pseudo classes that you don't have to add yourself in the HTML. They're just there. So if we look for something with a class of student, and we look for the pseudo class first child, then it will match anything with a class of student that is the first child of its parent. So the first one. So if it's the first one, how about a border bottom none? Save, refresh. Yay, it went back to 1 pixel. Let's add another one. Ah, shucks. Now there's an extra thick border between the second and third one, right? So maybe first child didn't really do the trick. What if we say they shouldn't have a top border if it's immediately following another student? So a student list item that's following another student list item shouldn't have a top border. How about that instead of this? So let's learn another new selector. The adjacent sibling selector. We used this in one of our image shortcuts early on. Adjacent sibling. So this will match anything with a class of student that immediately follows another element with a class of student. They're siblings and they're right next to each other. Then we say border top 0. Refresh. Ah, it went away. Now all my borders look just right. So let's look at these list items here. Look at the top one. What rules apply? Well, my .student rule applies. Anything that matches all LIs will match. Look at the second one, and I've got an extra rule. Now this adjacent sibling selector also matches, in addition to the others. Same with the next one. But this rule does not match that first one. Exactly what I wanted. So something with a class of student that is an adjacent sibling, the very next thing following another element with a class of student. Now it's looking pretty good. Begin styling the list items.